Every great power eventually discovers that its greatest danger does not always come from beyond its borders. Sometimes the deepest threat grows quietly from within. Rome had overthrown its kings in the name of liberty, but freedom was not shared equally among its people. While the Republic celebrated balance and justice, thousands of ordinary citizens found themselves trapped by debt, excluded from political office, and burdened with defending a state that offered them little protection in return. At the same time, enemies surrounded Rome on every side. Mountain tribes descended from the Apennines. Latin cities questioned Roman leadership. Powerful Etruscan kingdoms watched from the north. Greek colonies flourished in the south. The young Republic faced a difficult choice. It could either resolve its internal divisions or risk being destroyed before its ambitions had truly begun. Remarkably, Rome managed to do both. Its greatest strength would not be perfection. It would be adaptation. The first great crisis arrived in 494 BC. The plebeians, the farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and soldiers who formed the majority of Rome's population, had grown increasingly frustrated. They served in the legions. They paid taxes. They cultivated the land. Yet political power remained concentrated among the patrician aristocracy. Debt posed an especially painful problem. A poor harvest or unsuccessful campaign could leave a citizen unable to repay his creditors. In extreme cases, debtors faced imprisonment or even debt bondage, a practice that many Romans viewed as deeply unjust. Eventually, patience ran out. Instead of launching a violent rebellion, the plebeians employed a far more effective strategy. They simply walked away. According to Roman tradition, thousands of citizens abandoned the city and established camp on a nearby hill, later known as the Sacred Mount. The Republic suddenly faced an impossible situation. Without its farmers, food production faltered. Without its craftsmen, commerce slowed. Most importantly, without its soldiers, Rome could no longer defend itself. The aristocracy quickly realized that governing without the people was impossible. Negotiations began. The result was one of the most important constitutional compromises in Roman history. The office of the tribune of the plebs was created. Unlike consuls or senators, tribunes represented the interests of ordinary citizens. Their powers were extraordinary. They could veto actions taken by magistrates, challenge decisions of the Senate, protect individuals from abuses of authority. Most remarkable of all, their persons were declared sacred under Roman religious law. Anyone who attacked a tribune committed not merely a political crime, but a sacrilege. For the first time, ordinary Romans possessed officials dedicated solely to defending their rights. The Republic had not eliminated conflict. It had institutionalized negotiation. This became one of Rome's defining characteristics. Rather than collapsing under social tension, Rome repeatedly sought compromise. Progress came slowly, often painfully, but the political system proved flexible enough to evolve. That flexibility would become one of the Republic's greatest competitive advantages. Yet another source of resentment remained: the law itself. For generations, Roman legal traditions had existed largely as unwritten customs interpreted by aristocratic magistrates. To many plebeians, justice depended too heavily upon the opinions of powerful individuals. They demanded something revolutionary. The law should be visible, accessible, equal. Around the middle of the 5th century BC, a commission of 10 officials, known as the Decemviri, was appointed to write Rome's first public legal code. The result became known as the 12 Tables. Displayed publicly within the city, these bronze inscriptions covered matters ranging from property disputes and inheritance to contracts, family law, and criminal procedure. Modern readers may find some punishments severe. By ancient standards, however, the 12 Tables represented a remarkable step toward transparency. Citizens no longer depended entirely upon the private knowledge of aristocratic judges. The rules governing society were now visible to everyone, Ironically, the very officials responsible for creating these reforms soon demonstrated why limits on power remained essential. According to tradition, the decemviri refused to surrender office after completing their work, prompting another political crisis. Whether every detail occurred precisely as later writers described remains uncertain, but the broader lesson became deeply embedded in Roman political culture. No office, however useful, should remain beyond accountability. While Rome slowly reformed its institutions, it also transformed its military. Every able-bodied citizen was expected to defend the Republic. Military service was not viewed as a profession. It was a civic obligation. The army reflected Roman society itself. Landowners supplied their own armor and weapons according to their wealth. Campaigns were often seasonal, allowing soldiers to return home for harvest. Service in battle became intertwined with political participation. The citizen who defended Rome also expected a voice in its future. This connection between military duty and citizenship distinguished Rome from many neighboring states. It fostered remarkable resilience. Defeat became a lesson rather than a catastrophe. Victory strengthened civic identity rather than merely enriching rulers. That resilience would soon face its greatest test. Throughout central Italy, the Republic found itself competing with neighboring Latin communities whose cultures closely resembled its own. Many had once been allies. Now they questioned Rome's growing influence. The resulting conflict, remembered as the Latin War, erupted during the 4th century BC. The fighting proved fierce, yet Rome's response after victory revealed something extraordinary. Unlike many ancient powers, it rarely relied solely upon destruction. Instead, defeated communities received varying degrees of incorporation. Some gained full Roman citizenship. Others retained local governments while accepting Roman authority. Still others entered alliances requiring military service in exchange for protection. It was an innovative strategy. Conquest created partners as often as subjects. Former enemies gradually became invested in Rome's success. Expansion, therefore, generated loyalty instead of endless rebellion. This flexible system of alliances would prove far more durable than simple occupation. The Republic's next opponents presented an entirely different challenge. Beyond the fertile plains of Latium rose the rugged Apennine Mountains. Here lived the Samnites, a confederation of fiercely independent highland tribes. Unlike the organized city-states Rome had previously confronted, the Samnites excelled at mountain warfare. Their knowledge of difficult terrain allowed them to launch swift attacks before disappearing into narrow valleys and steep passes. The struggle between Rome and the Samnites lasted for decades. It became one of the longest and most exhausting conflicts in early Roman history. The Republic suffered devastating setbacks. None proved more humiliating than the disaster at the Caudine Forks in 321 BC. Trapped inside a narrow mountain pass, an entire Roman army found itself surrounded. Escape became impossible. Rather than slaughtering the trapped soldiers, the Samnites forced them to surrender. In a symbolic act of humiliation, Roman troops were ordered to pass beneath a yoke made from crossed spears, a ritual signifying complete submission. The psychological impact was immense. For many states, such a defeat might have shattered confidence. Rome responded differently. It rebuilt, reorganized, returned. Instead of abandoning the war, Roman commanders studied their failures. Roads were carved through mountainous terrain to improve supply lines. New colonies secured strategic positions. Military formations evolved to operate more effectively across difficult landscapes. Rome treated defeat not as evidence of weakness, but as instruction. This willingness to learn became one of its greatest strategic advantages. After nearly half a century of intermittent warfare, the conflict reached its climax at the Battle of Sentinum in 295 BC. For the first time, several Italian peoples united against the Republic. Samnites, Etruscans, Umbrians, Gallic tribes, Together, they hoped to halt Roman expansion forever. The battle became one of the largest fought in Italy before the rise of the empire. Ancient tradition preserves one particularly dramatic moment. During the fighting, the Roman consul Publius Decius Mus reportedly performed the ritual of devotio. According to religious custom, he dedicated both himself and the enemy army to the gods of the underworld before charging directly into battle. He was killed, but Roman morale surged. Whether every detail occurred exactly as later writers described is impossible to verify. Yet the story perfectly reflected Roman ideals. Duty outweighed survival. Personal sacrifice served the Republic. Victory belonged not to individuals, but to the state. The coalition collapsed. Rome emerged as the dominant power in central Italy. Still, one final rival remained. In southern Italy, prosperous Greek cities looked across the sea toward the wider Hellenistic world rather than toward Rome. Their wealth, culture, and military traditions differed greatly from those of the Latin Republic. When conflict eventually erupted, these cities sought assistance from one of the most celebrated generals of the age. His name was Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, a brilliant commander, a relative of Alexander the Great, and the first man who would force Rome to confront the military traditions of the Greek world. The battles ahead would introduce war elephants to Italian battlefields, redefine victory itself, and prepare Rome for an even greater contest waiting just beyond the horizon. Across the narrow waters of Sicily, another republic watched Rome's rise with growing concern. Its ships ruled the sea. Its merchants controlled Mediterranean trade. Its wealth rivaled kingdoms. Soon, Rome would meet Carthage, and the struggle between them would decide the future of the ancient world. Every empire eventually encounters an adversary that forces it to redefine itself. For Rome, that adversary was not another Italian tribe. It was a civilization that had already mastered the sea, while Rome still looked inland. Across the Mediterranean, on the northern coast of Africa, stood a city unlike any Rome had ever faced. Its harbours bustled with merchants from every corner of the known world. Its warehouses overflowed with silver from Spain, ivory from Africa, and precious goods from the East. Its fleets crossed the Mediterranean with unmatched confidence, while its wealth funded armies recruited from distant lands. Its name was Carthage. For generations, Rome and Carthage had prospered without direct conflict. One dominated the Italian peninsula, the other commanded the western Mediterranean. Geography kept them apart. But between them lay an island that neither power could afford to ignore. Sicily, rich in grain, strategically positioned, and surrounded by vital sea routes, Sicily was the gateway between Europe and Africa. Whoever controlled it could influence commerce, military movement, and the balance of power across the Mediterranean. Sooner or later, Rome and Carthage were destined to collide. The question was never if, only when. The spark came from a local dispute that neither great power had originally intended to fight. In the Sicilian city of Messana, a group of mercenaries known as the Mamertines seized control and appealed first to Carthage and then to Rome for protection against their enemies. The Roman Senate hesitated. Intervening meant crossing the sea for the first time with a major army. It also meant challenging the strongest naval power in the Mediterranean. Some senators argued that Sicily lay beyond Rome's natural sphere of influence. Others warned that allowing Carthage to dominate the island would place a powerful rival only a short distance from the Italian mainland. Strategic concerns prevailed. In 264 BC, Roman forces crossed the Strait of Messina. The First Punic War had begun. At first glance, the contest appeared hopeless for Rome. Its legions had earned a formidable reputation on land, but the Republic possessed almost no naval tradition. Carthage, by contrast, had spent centuries refining maritime warfare. Its sailors were professionals. Its shipyards produced powerful warships at remarkable speed. Its admirals understood currents, winds, and naval tactics that Romans had never experienced. If the war remained at sea, Rome seemed destined to lose. Yet once again, the Republic responded not with resignation, but with adaptation. According to ancient tradition, the Romans captured a stranded Carthaginian warship and used it as a model to construct an entire fleet. Whether the story is entirely accurate remains uncertain, but archaeology and historical evidence confirm the astonishing speed with which Rome transformed itself into a naval power. Within months, shipyards across Italy were producing hundreds of vessels. Building ships, however, was easier than training sailors. Rome solved this problem with characteristic ingenuity. Rather than attempting to outmaneuver experienced Carthaginian crews, the Romans sought to turn naval combat into something their soldiers already understood: land warfare. They developed a boarding bridge known as the corvus, a heavy wooden gangway fitted with an iron spike. When enemy ships approached, the bridge dropped onto the opposing deck, locking the vessels together. Roman legionaries then stormed aboard. Instead of fighting a naval battle, they fought an infantry battle at sea. It was an unconventional solution, but it worked. The innovation allowed inexperienced sailors to support highly disciplined soldiers, shifting the balance of combat in Rome's favor. The war dragged on for more than 2 decades. Storms destroyed entire fleets. Victories were followed by disasters. Both republics exhausted enormous financial resources. In the end, Carthage sought peace. The treaty signed in 241 BC forced Carthage to surrender Sicily, pay a substantial indemnity, and acknowledge Rome's growing influence over the Western Mediterranean. For the first time, Rome possessed territory beyond the Italian peninsula. The Republic had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer merely an Italian power. It had become an imperial one. Yet victory brought unexpected consequences. New provinces required governors. Foreign wealth flowed into Italy. Successful generals gained enormous prestige. Expansion, once seen as a means of protecting Rome, increasingly became an opportunity for personal ambition. The Republic had won the war, but the seeds of future political conflict had quietly been planted. Carthage, meanwhile, refused to accept permanent decline. While Rome consolidated its gains, a remarkable Carthaginian family began rebuilding its fortunes. The Barcids. Foremost among them was Hannibal Barca, a gifted commander who established a new power base in the Iberian Peninsula. Spain offered rich silver mines, fertile land, and fresh opportunities for expansion. After Hamilcar's death, leadership passed first to his son-in-law, Hasdrubal, and eventually to Hamilcar's eldest son, a young officer whose name would become legendary, Hannibal Barca. Ancient writers tell a dramatic story. As a child, Hannibal supposedly accompanied his father to a sacred altar. There, Hamilcar demanded that the boy swear eternal hostility toward Rome. Whether this oath occurred exactly as described cannot be confirmed. But Hannibal's later actions certainly gave the story enduring credibility. No Roman commander would ever forget his name. In 218 BC, tensions finally erupted once more. The immediate cause involved the Spanish city of Saguntum, whose alliance with Rome challenged Carthaginian influence in Iberia. When Hannibal captured the city, Rome declared war. The Second Punic War had begun. Most Roman leaders expected Carthage to attack by sea once again. Hannibal chose an entirely different path. Rather than sailing across the Mediterranean, he marched north through Spain, across southern Gaul, and toward one of the greatest natural barriers in Europe, the Alps. Even today, the journey seems almost unimaginable. Ancient sources describe tens of thousands of soldiers, cavalry, and dozens of war elephants climbing narrow mountain passes amid snow, rockfalls, hostile tribes, and freezing temperatures. The exact route remains one of history's enduring debates. Archaeologists, geologists, and historians continue to propose competing possibilities, each supported by different forms of evidence. What is beyond dispute is the achievement itself. Against extraordinary odds, Hannibal emerged into northern Italy. Rome had expected a naval invasion. Instead, an enemy army stood on Italian soil. The years that followed became some of the darkest in Roman history. Hannibal repeatedly defeated Roman armies through brilliant tactical maneuvering. At the Battle of Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, and finally, in 216 BC, at Cannae. Cannae remains one of the most studied battles in military history. Outnumbered, Hannibal deliberately allowed the center of his line to bend backward while stronger troops held the flanks. As eager Roman legions pressed forward, Carthaginian forces enveloped them from both sides. The trap closed. Ancient estimates vary, but modern historians believe that tens of thousands of Roman soldiers died in a single day. Entire generations of Rome's political and military leadership were wiped out. The Republic had suffered one of the greatest defeats in its history. Many allies abandoned Rome. Some cities opened their gates to Hannibal. For a moment, it appeared that the Republic itself might collapse. Yet something extraordinary happened. Rome refused to surrender. No peace delegation was sent. No negotiations were requested. Instead, the Senate ordered new armies raised. Teenagers enlisted. Older veterans returned to service. Even enslaved men were offered freedom in exchange for military duty. The Republic absorbed unimaginable losses and continued fighting. It was a display of collective resilience that astonished even Rome's enemies. Hannibal had shattered Roman armies. He had not broken Roman resolve. But survival alone would not win the war. Rome still needed someone capable of defeating history's greatest battlefield commander. That man was already rising through the ranks. His victories would carry the war from Italy to Africa itself. And on the plains near the town of Zama, two of antiquity's greatest generals would finally meet face to face. The outcome would determine not only the fate of Rome and Carthage, but the future of the Mediterranean world itself.